Hi, my name is Gerhard Schwantner and welcome to Selling Power TV. Today we have the pleasure of meeting with Warren Shiver. He's partner with the Symmetrics Group. Welcome, Warren.
Hi, Gerhard.
So, you're specializing in sales transformation. Let's start out. What is the definition of sales transformation in your mind?
Yeah, typically, there's a large variance in sales transformations, right? But typically it's a company that wants to either release or develop a new value proposition and take that value proposition to either new customers, like a new vertical, or their existing customer base.
So do you feel transformation is something that is a race without a finish line, or is something that you achieve once and then you're done?
I think there are certainly major milestones, right? But I think it is an ongoing for most companies. Certainly their competitors, the marketplace, those enduring trends remain the same and that there's constant change. But I think we see and find that most companies, you look at the marketplace right now, HP, for example, is going through a lot of change. Most companies, there are certain milestones that they want to hit with their sales transformation, and usually those are measurable.
Right. So what triggers the need for a sales transformation? Do people come to you and say, we need sales transformation?
Typically not, and typically they don't use exactly that language. Typically, obviously, there's a major revenue or margin shortfall. There might be a lot of turnover in the sales organization, or there's been a new competitive threat or entrant into the marketplace, right? So typically those are some of the drivers. There also could be a leadership change, right? I think as you were pointing out to me, I think the average lifespan of a CSO right now is about 18 months. So typically bringing in a new sales leader will drive potentially the need to transform, if not in a large way, certainly small incremental ways.
Right. So there are two things that strike me in any sales organization. One, there are a lot of moving parts, which is people, process, and technology that need to be aligned. Mm-hmm. Number two, there are a lot of emerging gaps, because a third of a sales force usually turns over.
Right.
So how do you juggle all those complexities?
Yeah. I think you have to have certainly a framework and a holistic approach of how those complexities work together. I think also another component of it is how does the sales organization work with and be supported by other groups that really rely on their success, like marketing, right, or customer marketing or sales operations. So I think you have to look at it holistically, and then you have to do obviously a quick assessment of what's working well, what's going to continue to work well, again with our destination in mind of where we want to transform to, what's the value proposition we want to be able to successfully deliver through the sales organization, and then figure out which parts do you have to focus on first.
So you start out with a roadmap for transformation.
That's exactly right.
And what are some of the benchmark points that you fix on that map?
Yeah, I think a couple are obviously having a well-defined sales process in place. I think a lot of companies, and we've seen in this industry over the last 15 or 20 years, certainly starting with the Neil Rackhams, the Mike Bosworths in the world in the 80s, the sales process and methodology has come a long way. Companies have made big investments there. They've also made big investments in enabling tools like Salesforce.com, right? But I think you still, at the end of the day, don't see ultimately the adoption that most companies want to see, whether it's an individual sales level, a team, or at the company level. So I think one metric along the way is seeing how can we drive more adoption of either the tools that they have, right, or put in place tools if those are needed. So I think that's kind of one step. The second step is how do you then enable the sales leader or the sales manager to coach, reinforce, and model those best practices, right? Because those are really the people that sustain the change long after the consultants or the sales trainers are gone.
So I hear you talk about people, process, and technology, mm-hmm. and you mentioned that process comes first.
I think process typically comes first, although I think strategy comes even before that. So okay. you may not change your strategy, but we worked recently with a consumer products goods company, about a $2 billion company. They've got about 700 business-to-business salespeople in the US, calling on large retailers. And historically, they were focused as a distribution model. Margins were streaking in that business due to competitive entrance into the market. They changed their business strategy to go after private label brands, sell more proprietary products to increase margin. Hence, their sales strategy needed to change then in order to be more of a category manager for their clients and sell solutions. So to your point, then the sales process needed to reflect that change in kind of business or sales strategy.
So where does culture fit into this?
Culture, that's a big question, a big part of it. I think, like you said, I think the people, process, and technology components all contribute to the culture of the company and the organization, right? They can either reinforce it or go in conflict to it. Also, I think the sales leader, ultimately the top leader, ultimately sets the culture and sets the path for the organization, right? So I think one of the things that's required for success from a sales transformation perspective is a visionary leader with some staying power, right? Who can stay long enough to see the transformation or see the change through.
To get the organization to align behind that vision.
Exactly.
Thank you, Warren. We're going to continue our conversation tomorrow, where we talk about how transformation takes place by changing people, process, and technology.